The Eclipse style guide is the guide that I started with when I started with hand tools, and I had no preferences for angles. I do know that my chisels, I believe they came honed at, or ground at 25 degrees. So the 30-degree setting on here was fine. I just used the measurement and I went to work. The longer I worked with my tools, the more, I guess I fell into different habits with different tools. And I decided that I actually like to hone my chisels and my irons closer to 40 degrees than I do to 30. So when you buy the Eclipse guide, it only comes with 2 different angles described on the side. The top plates here, these are for your plain irons, and the little grooves here on either side, those are for your chisels. And you have a 25 degree or a 30 degree angle to choose from. So let me show you how you can figure out all the other angles you might want to sharpen to. So the first method we're going to use is a very low-tech approach. I've got a piece of scrap here that I've cut a 50-degree angle on. And again, and the angle we're talking about is the included angle between the surface of the bench and the top of the blade. I cut these little angle blocks on a chop saw, so they're pretty precise, but they really don't need to be. You could lay these out and go to your bandsaw and just closely follow the line and get close enough, or you could cut them by hand. And even if you're just getting started with a handsaw, if you can get even a jagged edge that's close to the line that you drew, then you're good enough to get set up for a honing guide. So I can set this angle block up here, and I can just keep pushing this iron until it flushes up with the blade. And you can't do a 50-degree angle with this honing guide. It's actually rubbing on the bottom of the body. I guess there's one reason why the Lie-Nielsen is a little bit better than the Eclipse. So no 50 degrees for us. Let's try 45. And we'll push it back up. There we go. And one of the things that I dislike about this honing guide is the fact that you really have to crank it down with a screwdriver to lock it. You can't do it with finger pressure. I know for a fact you can use just finger pressure with the Lie-Nielsen guide. I'm not so sure about the Lee Valley, but I have a feeling it's probably made well enough that you can just use your finger pressure. You can see that the blade is not sitting down on top of the wood, and so I'm not going to get a perfect mark here, but we're not looking for perfection. We're looking for a rough, repeatable measure so that every time we come back to hone it, we can get pretty close to where we started, so that we're not taking off a bunch of extra material that we hadn't planned on. So this is our 45-degree mark, and we'll repeat the process with each block. 35 and 30. So we're starting to accumulate some good sizes. Let's take a look at a little bit more of a high-tech version of this process. If you have one of these digital angle gauges, they're really handy for this job. So we can turn it on and make sure it's zeroed out or relatively close, and set it up here. Should be pretty close to 30, looks like it is. We're not looking for perfect angles here. We're just looking for something that's relatively repeatable. So let's go ahead and go down to 25. 24.9 is definitely close enough. So now we're running into a bit of an issue here. If you look closely, you can see that the tip of the blade is not touching on the bench, which means the back of the primary bevel is the thing that's touching the bench. So if we wanted to get really fussy about this measurement, we would extend a measurement down to where the two lines intersect. But that's probably going to be the difference of a degree or so. I'm not going to mess with it. It's not worth the trouble. We'll do one more setting in case we really want to slice the grain. We'll go to 20 degrees, and that is quite the reach for this guide. This is where, if I was using the Lie-Nielsen honing guide, I would have the long jaws on here. So we've got our setup. We just repeat the process with a chisel and record the measurements on this side. There we have it. That's how you make a setup board for any side clamping honing guide. And I'm not going to bother to tell you the dimensions because unless your honing guide was made in the same batch in the same factory as mine, the measurements are likely to be just a little bit different. So remember, don't get too caught up in perfect angles. You're just looking for a relative reference to come back to so that when you start sharpening, you save as much time as possible.